Some researchers say there is no common detection of a norm-violating event. Acts in some contexts are worth judging as blameworthy or not, and those same acts in another context may be blameless, even morally required. Social relational context affects moral judgment. As a result, moral judgments regulate our relationships. Let's apply the relationship regulation model to a hypothetical transgression. Imagine you decide to take a soak in your neighbor's hot tub without permission. This is really different than taking a soak in the hot tub purchased with your spouse's bonus installed in your home. The different moral judgments for this act are due to the difference in social relational context. You and your neighbor, if you interact, are likely to consider yourselves equal in an equality matching relationship. You making use of their hot tub exploits them. You're not equal. You claimed rank. On the other hand, you and your spouse are in a communal sharing relationship. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. It's not possible to exploit the resource or try and outrank the fellow household member. Everything's shared. So a soak is only blameworthy when it violates the expected moral motives in a relational context. Of course, the impact of relational models on moral judgments gets more serious than hot tub shenanigans. People vary in the extent to which they honor different relational models, like authority ranking models that promote hierarchies. A person who sees a relationship as hierarchical might find themselves in serious disagreement with a person who sees the relationship as an equality matching relationship. The absence of equal treatment may be viewed by a person who believes the relationship is an equality matching relationship as harm that makes them unsafe, whereas the absence of equal treatment for those who believe the relationship is an authority ranking relationship may be viewed as the right thing to do. Not only not harmful, but morally required. This would suggest that there is widespread disagreement about harm. Some scholars argue that indeed there is. But if we take a very broad perspective, we'll see that humankind can be viewed as universally concerned about harm, protecting oneself from harm, one's loved ones from harm, and beyond that, one's reputation, job, and nation. Indeed, unlike our evolutionary ancestors, humans are prepared to go on the offensive for these aspects of life, engaging in warfare, sometimes for many, many years, in the name of a value. Ultimately, we know moral judgment is multifaceted. It's irrational, and that irrationality is sometimes contradicted by rational moral judgment. This rational and irrational moral judgment, it occurs in contexts, and one of those is the relational context, the interpersonal context. And another context is the personal context, self-directed moral judgment, the intrapersonal moral judgment. Given the multifaceted nature of moral judgment, but also the universal valuation of preventing harm and reducing harm, can we say that there's something we agree about as a universal aspect of human morality? As I'll spell out over the next few slides, the evidence does point to harm. It's most commonly and universally regarded as the most important consideration when a person determines what's right and what's wrong. A concern about harm characterizes morality from early in development throughout the rest of life. We may not agree about what is harmful, but we seem to know it when we see it. We see it often in our own personal way. where does this universal aversion to harm come from? When we learned about aversion to harm in some studies, we looked at how we view harm to the self versus harm to others. And it doesn't seem like a surprising thing or a mystery that people will find harm to the self aversive. It's harm to others where people seem to vary in how much they are distressed by this. Like our evolutionary ancestors, but with emotional control, we react negatively to aggressors and insults and unfair exploitation, but we do so with individual differences in the intensity of that reaction. In general, the reactive aggression of apes is downplayed in humans, and proactive aggression and violence replaces it. But even within these types of violence, humans do vary in the level of violence they express, of course. The variation in humans' propensity for violence has been examined through several lenses. Across human history, social and economic influences shaped cultures and the ways in which people do harm each other and how often. The harm people do to each other and to protect themselves and close others is interwoven into culture and cultural norms. For example, we studied herder economies around the world, including the American South mainly. These were embedded in cultures of honor, which defined the acceptability of violence. And now, culturally evolved institutions like honor cultures, religions, values, and oaths continue to define the acceptability of violence. We know that these cultural forces are not always successful at promoting moral behavior. Extreme harm doing and hate is found in psychopaths, for example, 1 in 100 people, and in people who are higher in their level of psychopathy but not clinically psychopaths. The scientific study of the spectrum of psychopathy has taught us about the neural underpinnings of violence and the differences in these neural underpinnings for reactive versus proactive violence. Changes in brain structure over evolutionary history and some specific patterns of neural activity involving prefrontal cortex down-regulating subcortical structures are now understood to counteract reactive aggression, that lashing out over insults, and enable proactive aggression, the calculated, unemotional attempts to harm others. Okay, but we're not just a human race that's complicated, self-contradictory, and destructive. It's clear that we're at a point in human history where we can make things happen over short and incredibly long distances, and each part of the Earth now relies on connections with other parts of the Earth, like never before. Humans' cultural tools for improving life and well-being are now more readily shared globally. Still not equally, unfortunately. Systems of fairness and punishment, medicine and education, religion and secular governance, these control violence and harm around the world. The psychology of good and evil is a complex mental toolkit. It has mechanisms to manage our evolved desire to win. It lends us the capacity to cooperate. It's multi-leveled. It uses rich storytelling to grapple with the puzzle of how to be good, from the Bible to the Constitution. And all the high-level storytelling and meaning-making relies in part on purely biological factors, the structures of brain and body that enable basic emotion and cognitive control, and that more and more we're connecting up with morality. There will always be more to learn about the science of morality and about the psychology of good and evil. And some of it is definitely in books and in articles, more and more. And some of the information about the psychology of good and evil we'll learn by living it. Ultimately, our unique experiences in mind and body over the lifetime as part of social contexts inform our own continually revised stories about how to solve the puzzle of evil and good. I just want to thank everyone in this class for making this an exciting, thought-provoking class. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you have a wonderful, well-deserved break. I look forward to seeing you post-COVID, and until then and in the future, I really hope you'll keep in touch. Thanks again.